What if everything you thought you knew about the Stone Age was wrong? What if, in a time when life was so hard that the weak were expected to die, people actually chose to care for someone who couldn't walk, couldn't hear, and probably couldn't even speak? This isn't fiction. This isn't some feel-good myth told around a fire. In the summer of 2024, archaeologists unearthed something in a cave in Spain that shattered our assumptions about prehistoric humanity. Deep within the Cova Negra cave, buried under thousands of years of earth and stone, they found the skull of a Neanderthal child. At first glance, it was just another fossil, but under closer study, the skull revealed something no one expected. This child had lived over 100,000 years ago and had Down syndrome. The scientists labeled her C1. She was likely around 6 years old when she died, and her tiny skull told a heartbreaking story. The bones showed clear signs of abnormal growth, especially around the inner ears and cranium. Textbook signs of trisomy 21, the genetic condition known today as Down syndrome. But in the world C1 lived in, there were no names for these things. There were no doctors, no medicine, no schools or therapy or support groups. Her life would have been unimaginably difficult from the very beginning. She would have struggled to walk. She likely had serious balance problems. Her inner ears were malformed, which meant she probably couldn't hear properly. And yet, despite all of that, she lived. Not for days or weeks, but for 6 full years. That fact alone should not be possible in a world where survival was already a daily battle for even the strongest and healthiest. But it happened, and it demands that we ask a terrifying, beautiful question. Why? The Stone Age was not known for its kindness. It was an age of ice, hunger, and blood. People lived in constant danger from predators, the cold, rival tribes, and starvation. Every mouth to feed was a risk. Every injury could mean death. The average lifespan was short, and the fight to survive began almost the moment you were born. In that kind of world, weakness was a liability. And yet, C1's tribe, whoever they were, chose not to abandon her. They chose, again and again, every day, to carry her when she couldn't walk, to feed her when she couldn't feed herself, to keep her warm, to clean her, to protect her. They did this not for a few days, not for a few weeks, but for years. The cost of keeping C1 alive would have been enormous. In a society where calories were everything, where meat was rare and sacred, feeding a child who could not contribute back was an unthinkable act of sacrifice. And yet, they did it. This wasn't just tolerance. This was compassion. And that word, compassion, might be the most dangerous and powerful word in all of human history. Because if Neanderthals, creatures we often paint as dumb, violent, and primitive, could feel empathy, then what does that say about us? If beings with no writing, no cities, and no science still chose love over survival, then how dare we call them lesser? This discovery at Cova Negra forces us to rewrite not just our history books, but our moral assumptions about early humans. It means that the idea of caring for the vulnerable isn't something we invented with civilization. It might be something that helped create civilization in the first place. Maybe empathy wasn't a result of progress. Maybe it was the beginning of progress. The way C1's remains were found only deepens the mystery. Her tiny bones weren't scattered or trampled or left in the open. They were carefully placed inside the cave, in a space that had been sheltered and protected from the elements. It wasn't just a dump site. It wasn't an accident. This looked like a burial, a deliberate choice. And while we can never know the exact thoughts or words of the people who placed her there, their actions speak volumes. They didn't just keep her alive. When she died, they mourned her. They gave her rest. In a world where survival was everything, they took time to say goodbye. That means she mattered. That means she was not a mistake. She was not a burden. She was loved. And now, over 100,000 years later, we are finally hearing her story. A child who could not speak may now speak louder than any king or conqueror. Her bones whisper truths across the ages. That compassion is older than language, older than cities, older than religion. It was there, in the dark of a Paleolithic cave, when a small tribe chose to carry a child who could not carry herself. And as we stand here in the 21st century, with all our science and screens and so-called sophistication, we are forced to ask a painful question. Would we have done the same? Or have we, in our rush toward progress, forgotten something those ancient Neanderthals knew by heart? Maybe the real mark of civilization isn't what we build. Maybe it's who we refuse to leave behind. There is something haunting about the idea that a group of Neanderthals, armed with nothing but stone tools and fire, chose to spend their precious energy caring for a child who would never grow strong enough to hunt or gather. Every day that C1 lived, someone had to choose her survival over something else. They may have gone hungry so she could eat. They may have slowed their travel so she could be carried. There were likely days when she was sick, when her crying echoed in the caves, and someone had to calm her even as danger crept outside. And yet, they stayed. They didn't abandon her in the night. They didn't leave her behind when food ran out or when the group had to move. What kind of love is that? What kind of memory lives in those bones, even now, tens of thousands of years later? We often think of Neanderthals as brutes, hairy, hunched, primitive shadows of modern humans who grunted and fought and didn't live long enough to matter. But discoveries like C1 force us to rethink that cartoon image. They weren't animals. They made tools, wore clothing, cooked food, painted caves, and, as we're learning, made emotional choices. The survival of a child with Down syndrome is not just a footnote in a dusty scientific report. It's a revelation. It's evidence of care, patience, and deliberate protection. You don't carry a child for 6 years through ice and storm unless you feel something deeper than instinct. And for that emotion to exist, it means Neanderthals had more than strength. They had spirit, maybe even something close to what we'd call a soul. What makes this story even more powerful is that it didn't happen last century or even last millennium. It happened more than 100,000 years ago, in a time before writing, before gods, before laws. Back then, there was no reward for kindness. There were no social safety nets, no legacy to leave behind, no reputation to polish. Every decision was about survival. And yet, somehow, compassion still won. That tells us something incredible about early human nature. That empathy might not be a result of culture, but the seed from which it grows. That when stripped of everything, technology, power, civilization, what remains might be the most human thing of all. The instinct to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Scientists who studied C1's remains found more than just a diagnosis. They found a story locked in calcium and marrow, the shape of her skull, the formation of her ear canals, and the wear on her tiny teeth all spoke of a life that was fragile but not forgotten. She wasn't treated as disposable. Her bones weren't scattered by animals or broken apart by time. They were preserved, protected, almost cradled by the earth. The position of her skull, the absence of trauma, and the location deep within the cave suggest care in her placement. Someone laid her there. Someone chose a spot. And when you choose a place to lay the dead, it means they mattered to the living. Now think about our modern world. Think about how often people with disabilities are pushed aside, institutionalized, forgotten, or denied basic rights. In a time where we have unlimited food, advanced healthcare, and global communication, we still struggle to extend true care to the most vulnerable. There are families today who abandon disabled children. There are systems that label them burdens. What does it say about us that a Neanderthal child with severe disabilities may have been treated with more day-to-day compassion than many people receive now? What have we really gained in our march of progress if empathy hasn't grown with it? Maybe we built cities, but forgot how to carry each other. C1's existence gives us more than science. It gives us a mirror. It asks us to look back so we can look inward. Maybe the true test of any society isn't how high it builds its towers or how fast it flies its machines, but how gently it treats its weakest members. This 6-year-old Neanderthal child, voiceless and fragile, now speaks with the weight of history. Her bones have outlasted empires. Her life, however short, sends a message longer than any scroll. It tells us that even in the harshest time imaginable, someone reached out and said, "You are worth it." And that is a legacy more powerful than fire. In the end, the story of C1 isn't just about one child. It's about what it means to be human. For over 100,000 years, her skull lay hidden in silence, buried beneath layers of dirt, stone, and time, waiting for someone to listen. Now that we've heard her, we can't unhear her. She forces us to confront every assumption we've made about our ancestors, and in doing so, every assumption we make about ourselves. If a small tribe of Neanderthals, living in constant fear of starvation and death, could still choose to love a child who would never be strong, then compassion isn't modern. It isn't a luxury that comes after survival. It might be the very thing that helped us survive in the first place. Archaeologists have called this discovery rare and unprecedented. But what they're really saying is that it changes the rules. Until now, many believed that prehistoric societies couldn't afford empathy, that they were too busy surviving to have time for tenderness. But C1's short life is a crack in that belief, a soft, quiet space in the middle of a brutal world. Her bones are a record of pain, yes, but also of care. No one lives 6 years with a condition like Down syndrome in a world of predators, ice, and famine without help. Every breath she took was a result of someone else's choice. And that choice, made again and again across 6 long winters, tells a story deeper than any carved tablet. There's a strange kind of time travel in stories like this. As we learn about C1, we're not just looking at the past, we're feeling it. Her survival pulls us into her world, makes it real. You can almost imagine her tribe crouched around a fire, with C1 in someone's arms, bundled in animal hide, sleeping against a chest that beat for her. Maybe she laughed. Maybe she cried often and loudly. Maybe someone gave her a name, though we'll never know what it was. And when she died, maybe they wept, not with words, not with rituals we'd recognize, but with the deep, wordless sorrow that comes from losing someone you love. That kind of pain doesn't need language. It never has. The implications of this discovery reach far beyond archaeology. They challenge the story we've told ourselves about civilization and progress. They suggest that the roots of kindness are buried deeper than any temple, deeper than any pyramid. That before we built monuments or wrote laws, we held each other. We made space for the weak. We carried those who couldn't walk. If Neanderthals could do this, then empathy isn't some byproduct of evolution. It's a core part of it. Maybe we didn't evolve despite our tenderness. Maybe we evolved because of it. And maybe, just maybe, we've lost something essential in all our towering advancement. C1's skull now sits not in a dark cave, but in a museum, illuminated and studied. Scientists draw charts and make comparisons, but the truth can't be captured in graphs alone. The truth lives in the choices her people made, in the food they shared, in the arms that lifted her day after day. That's the legacy she left behind, not in words, but in love. We can measure bones, but we can't measure the moments someone stayed up all night to calm her. We can count her years, but we'll never know how many times someone whispered comfort into her ear, even if she couldn't hear it. And yet, those invisible moments are the most important part of her story. So what does this mean for us now? In a world that moves too fast and often forgets its heart, maybe it's a reminder that progress isn't only about what we build. It's about who we choose not to abandon. Maybe compassion isn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. And maybe the most advanced thing any of us can do is what those Neanderthals did so long ago: to stop, to care, to carry, and to remember. C1 didn't change the world by living longer or doing more. She changed it simply by being loved. And in that love, we find the oldest, strongest, and most beautiful truth we've ever known. The past isn't just bones and dust. Sometimes it's a mirror, and what we see in it depends on whether we're ready to remember what really made us human.